Mom, Dad, there's no way that I can express to you what I'm feeling right now. My heart is full to bursting, except to say, I'm the king of the world!
Hello and welcome back to Cameron, King of the World. And finally, for me, The Abyss. So this is my thoughts on the 1989 film, The Abyss. This has been like my white whale. This has been like a mountain to conquer for me. And to kind of pull the curtain back just a little bit, not for the last time in this series, this is the last kind of review I'm doing for this series. Now, the videos that you've seen before and that you're about to see following this video were all filmed over a period of about 6 months. And today is the 10th of March 2021, the day I will be posting this video. This hasn't happened so far. I've managed to enjoy the first 9 days of the Cameron King of the World series, just watching it all go out, all finished, all ready and rendered and edited and thumbnailed and, you know, all that stuff. It's all just all out there. But there was that pesky number 10, The Abyss, that wasn't ready because I hadn't filmed the video yet. And I've left it until the last possible moment. And then again, the next video you're about to see was shot maybe 5 months ago. So why did it take me so long to finally get around to The Abyss? Well, we're going to talk about that in this video. It is my review of the film, but I have to give you some background, and I'm afraid the background is going to be a little bit involved because I think I need to set up for you my personal relationship with The Abyss and why I struggle with it. So we're going to get into that. I first saw the film when I was a kid. My mum showed me Aliens when I was a kid, which I must have talked about in some of the videos about aliens, the many videos about aliens. So that was like a formative film for me, and then the Terminator movies came shortly afterwards, and you know, I was then becoming aware of what directors were and that they made multiple films, and that you know, you could look at something like the Terminator movies and Aliens and go, oh, they're James Cameron movies, and so I want to see other films that he has done. And so my mum also had The Abyss, and I don't remember much about, like, it's not a film that we watched together a lot. We maybe even only watched it once. She showed it to me for sure because I vaguely remember her explaining to me what the bends are, and also, you know, and in relation to Michael Biehn's character in the film, Coffee, and his hand is kind of shaking and he's kind of stopping himself, and she was explaining to me what the pressure of being under that much water will do to the brain sometimes, especially if you don't decompress and all that kind of stuff. So she was explaining to me the science behind that as I was watching the film. But I have very little memory. I think I remember being a little bit like, oh, the woman's boobs are on show. Wow. Okay. Should I go there? Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. I mean, we've all seen our parents naked, right? Okay, when I was a kid, that certainly was. I can't believe I'm about to say. I'm already in it now. I'm in too deep. I don't know how I'll be able to cut around that. So I'm just gonna go for it. Okay, I remember seeing Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio's breasts in The Abyss and thinking, oh, they're just, they're just like my mum's. What am I doing? What is this video? Okay, that stays in. So I remember that. So that's kind of my only real memory. I remember them being like very close to like drowning inside the submersible and being very stressed out. But apart from that, it didn't grab onto me in the same way as Aliens did, or the Terminator films. I have to try and get over the fact I just said that. But I you know, it is what it is. I don't know if it's the same with other people. I don't know if they had kind of seen their parents in the nude as young kids, where it doesn't seem to matter. But yeah, I definitely remember that was probably the first. Well, I don't know actually, 'cause I think you kind of see Linda Hamilton's breasts in the Terminator, which I'd probably seen before The Abyss. I don't know why I'm now telling you about the first formative boob viewing experiences of my youth that were all James Cameron movies. But anyway, it was just like a kind of out of nowhere thing, because it wasn't a love scene, you know. So when they rip open her vest. It was kind of, for a kid, you know, it was kind of like, oh, like, you know. Anyway, so The Abyss, watched it on video. So my mum had it on VHS, but I never went back to it. It didn't have the oomph and kind of the action that I enjoyed in the other films, and so I just never really kind of, you know, gravitated back towards it. So the next time I probably saw it was in my teenage years when it came out in DVD, and I remember there was some talk on the internet forums and stuff, like I think it was like DVDreview.net or something like that, about how it was going to be this special edition DVD with, and they just put out maybe before that possibly the Aliens special edition DVD, which had the extended cut and stuff, which I'm not sure if that was ever on the VHS that I had, so I don't know the full timeline of everything, but I know for sure that I was excited about The Abyss, to revisit it as a, you know, teenager and think, oh, I should give that film another look. You know, James Cameron, I'm a bit more serious about my film loving and stuff. So I got the DVD, and there was like the excellent hour-long making of documentary. I watched that, devoured that, but I don't remember really watching it then. I must have, you know, because I mean, I loved the extras at the time, but I'm fairly sure I would have actually watched the movie, and the DVD came with the two different versions. And we will talk about the special edition version of The Abyss, the extended cut, in a separate video, because I really wanted to give that extended cut of the film its own time, and so I haven't watched it yet. So that'll probably be like the final review that I film for this, which I need to do in the next couple of days. But that's to one side. So I'm just talking about the theatrical version in this video. When I finally get around to the film, trust me, it's coming. Just bear with me for a few more minutes. So I had the DVD, and I see. I don't really remember if I did watch the special edition version or not. I don't seem to remember watching it, because I know there's the big tidal wave sequence at the end of the special edition cut, and I was hugely fascinated with tidal waves when I was younger, especially around that age. Well, maybe not around that age, but like in my like 10, 11, 12, like I was really like obsessed with tidal waves for some reason. And I have a vivid memory of seeing clouds one morning when I woke up to get up for school, and the clouds looked like a big giant tidal wave, and I was just like awestruck at how cool it looked. And so I was kind of like intrigued by the idea of these larger than life 100-foot tidal waves and stuff. And anyway, so that was one thing. And so I felt like I would have vividly remembered, or at least have some memory, but I have no memory of watching The Abyss again when I was a teenager. I must have at some point. And then I feel like I showed it to Connie maybe in the early stages of our relationship, which would be about 10 years ago now. So even if we didn't, it's a good 10 to 15 years since I last saw this film, and for every other James Cameron film, I can't really say that. So this was the big one for me for this series, even though revisiting a lot of the films for this series had a much bigger impact on me, and we'll get to that in future videos and stuff, which I'm really looking forward to you guys seeing. I think that this was the one that I was the most intrigued to go back to. When I finally sat down and said, let's do a Cameron series, it was like, oh, The Abyss. And the key thing for me was finding a copy of it that would be good quality, because again, I probably watched it with Connie because we watched a lot of we watched True Lies and Aliens and the Terminator films. So we must have gone back and done The Abyss. And back then, you know, 2009, 2010, our TVs were so small you could just download a DVD rep of a movie and it would be fairly watchable. The Abyss has never been released in high definition. That's why we don't have a lovely Blu-ray on the side here to display. And I almost toyed with the idea of printing off a Blu-ray cover and just putting it there just for kind of the for show's sake, but it doesn't exist. And I don't know if I talked about it in the previous video or not, because I filmed that quite a while ago, but there've been rumblings about The Abyss coming out on Blu-ray and even a 4K Blu-ray, but nothing has really materialized. Cameron said that the kind of the final versions are there for him to approve on, to sign off on, but he hasn't done it yet. He hasn't had the time. He said it would take him 7 hours each to review True Lies and The Abyss, and he doesn't have 14 hours to spare. So that was a few years ago. There was an Instagram post of some guys in a studio, and they just posted like some shots of the computers and like The Abyss and like the 4K remaster and stuff. So something's been done, but nothing's getting released. Now, last year at some point, I believe 2020, maybe even 2019, it could even be 2018, but in the past couple of years, on the HBO Max streaming service, the film went up. So I have gone ahead and illegally downloaded the film. Yes, I'm fully admitting that. because, hey, I've been waiting for over a decade for this thing to come out on Blu-ray. It ain't happening. I'm going to have to find a way to watch the film somehow, and I want to watch it in the best possible quality. It's not like I'm not buying the movie. I have the DVD of the film, which I probably could have put here on the thing, but it's back at my mum's place. But I wanted to see it, in the best possible quality. And in True Lies, there's a HD copy available that you can actually buy. It's actually over here on the side here, and there's a whole story about that, which I'll get to in the True Lies video. So there's that. And The Abyss is just the one that, the one that got away, kind of. Well, True Lies still is. True Lies needs a proper re-release as well, but The Abyss, for whatever reason, just never got. And I feel like that might be one of the reasons why people don't talk about it as much these days, because it missed a generation of home video. It was one of the first big, I think, Laserdisc special edition releases that had like a new version of the movie that was made specifically for that Laserdisc release. Like, it was a big, it must have been a big, this is conjecture, but it must have been a big Laserdisc release, because Cameron got to go back and kind of spend millions of dollars to kind of to do a new version of the movie. So it went from that to DVD, and then it just stopped, and we've now gone to Blu-ray, we've now gone to 4K Blu-ray, and there's no Abyss. So it's just one of those things. And so I just thought, I can't wait any longer. So I looked online, did some digging, and I found an excellent copy of the film. Now, I initially thought it was ripped from HBO Max because it just looked so good. I couldn't fathom where this thing had come from. But then I noted that the origin of the file that I had found was dated 2014, which is really interesting because it just looks fantastic. Now, if you look too closely, maybe it's not perfect, but it's a really high quality, big file size, high definition. It was sourced from some high definition screening on TV at some point, and the person who uploaded it has done a color grade on it to make it look more like it used to on the DVD and have more of a bluer tone, I think. I'm not sure exactly what it looked like before, but it's the one I went with. I looked at a few different copies, and this was the one that looked, for my eyes, fantastic. And so that's the one that me and Connie sat down to watch 6 months ago. Yeah, let that sink in. No joke intended. I'm getting caught up on that lately, like saying something like that and then saying no pun intended, but then realizing there's no pun, but it's kind of similar. Let that sink in. The Abyss, there's no pun there, but there is kind of a possible joke. But saying no joke intended just doesn't roll off the tongue very well. I'll have to work on that and think about that. You should go back to your training. Anyway, so I found this version. Me and Connie watched it 6 months ago. 6 months ago. And this was during the beginning stages of me gearing up to do this Cameron series. So, okay, I'll film the review on Saturday. And it's like, I got this other thing going on. I'll do it on Monday. And this just went on for months. To the point where the longer it got, the more I thought, oh my God, I'm starting to even forget certain bits and details. And I wasn't entirely sure. And I thought, I'm going to have to watch it again. It's like, I don't want to watch it again. So I can't believe how long this preamble is. I'm so sorry, but it's an important part of this whole journey for me. So my initial thoughts on revisiting it 6 months ago were wow. Because what I had done is I'd gone and watched the hour-long making of on YouTube again, and it really got me amped up to watch the movie with that context of the behind-the-scenes stories, refreshing it in my mind after about 15 years when the DVD came out. And so I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm looking forward to watching this again. And unlike any other time I'd seen The Abyss, I was wowed by the technical marvel that the film is. It really is a technical marvel. But I was a little bit tired that evening, and I did nod off a few times. Now, having gone back and watched the film again this past weekend, I can now confirm to myself that I didn't really miss anything. There's just a few shots here and there, so my nodding off was clearly very brief, and I was kind of concerned I'd missed maybe like 5 or 10 minutes of the film. I hadn't, which is a good thing. But also, I was thinking, like, am I not giving this film enough credit? Was my tiredness working against me? Because, you can watch the best film ever made if you're in a bad mood, unless it's a really happy-go-lucky film that lifts your spirits and actually has a kind of a good effect on you. You need to be in the right frame of mind sometimes, and it's so difficult to nail that down. And setting, the time that you watch it, who you watch it with, there's so many factors into a movie watching experience. And I thought, I don't know. And I thought that it was great, and I rated it highly, but I just thought I needed to give it another shot. So that's why I've left it this long. And now again, as I said last weekend, I watched it again. So now I can finally talk about The Abyss and give you my thoughts after having revisited it twice in the past 6 months. And I feel like I can now confidently talk to you about The Abyss, why I like it, and why I struggle with it. Alright, let's get into it. So, The Abyss is, and I might get some details wrong, because again, unlike the other films, apart from maybe True Lies, I don't know it as well, inside and out, like some of the other films. And I think I said in the previous video, I was telling a story about how Michael Biehn was on an underwater set and all the lights went out, and I think I said in that video that he was on the Russian submarine set, not the Russian submersible. So that's not the case. There is no Russian submarine in the movie, at least in the theatrical cut. I don't know about the special edition cut, because as far as I know about the special edition is that it increases the kind of subplot of the kind of the Russian tensions of the storyline. But it's actually an American submarine. But during that sequence, they talk about how there are Russian submarines nearby, and they theorize that the NTI that they see down there, or that Lindsay sees down there, could be a Russian submersible. That's where I got kind of confused, and it kind of tripped me up a little bit. So he wasn't on the Russian submarine set; it was an American submarine, the one that they go down in. Anyway, so I'll get to that point. So the story is essentially about this. What would you call them? Kind of a deep ocean mining station on the ocean bed, not on the very bottom, because they kind of at one point the station, the deep core, is actually on this kind of cliff face that goes down much further. So they're not like at the very bottom of the ocean, but they're still down a considerable depth. And I don't think one of those stations has ever really existed. And I'm sure that it's theoretically possible. And I'm sure James Cameron probably would like the idea of that to be at least somewhat permissible, as he likes to say. That's one of his favorite words, I think, when he's defending some of his films and some of the logical leaps that might crop up throughout them. So, but you have this crew, and it's very much in the alien aesthetic of the truckers in space. These are just these miners, these kind of oil rig workers. But I think they are kind of, it's like an oil mining kind of thing. I'm not entirely sure. See, I don't think the film really sets that up as well as it could. And maybe that's where the special edition works in a little bit longer. Because I think with the lengthier cut, there's quite a lot of additional scenes, and maybe that fleshes out some of the... These are what these guys are doing. I'm not entirely sure, even after watching the film twice over the past, half a year. Deep Core, that's the station, and I think they're a mining group, but the thing is, their job is never really shown in the movie, because the movie is about all these things that keep happening and keep getting thrown in their way, things that are pushing them outside of their comfort zone, like to the extreme, so it's really nothing about what they're actually doing down there. It's just the fact that they're there, and then things start to happen, and it just keeps going from different mission to different mission, and then it's just all-out survival, and that's where the film really kicks into high gear. But the film opens with an American submarine that encounters this entity down in the ocean, and it kind of just fucks up the submarine. The submarine crashes into the side of this kind of cliff face under the ocean, and so, it's a very important submarine with nuclear warheads on board. And it just so happens that it crashes near the deep core rig, and so the government comes in and they enlist the people on that kind of the mining rig facility underwater to go down and dive down to the submarine and to see what's happened, because they've lost contact, and it's a very important submarine. And they send down a group of Navy SEALs to kind of help them, but also to carry out the missions themselves, but also to get those, because they know how to drive the submersibles, they know what they're doing with the diving equipment and stuff. And so it's the Navy SEALs and the deep core crew going down to the submarine, and the kind of the head, the leader of the group is Bud, Virgil Brigman, played by Ed Harris. And I've talked about it in the previous video how Bud and his wife Lindsay, and they're kind of separated and going through a divorce at the time of the film beginning, played by Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. There's kind of an analog there for Cameron's kind of dissolving relationship with his wife at the time, Gail Ann Hurd, who had worked with him as a producer on the previous two films, The Terminator and Aliens. And it struck me watching the film last weekend that she actually sounds a bit like Gail Hurd at times. And you know, I've been watching a lot of interviews and listening to commentaries and stuff, and so I'm fairly familiar with her voice, and she kind of has the same voice. And there's just these moments in the film, like when Bud first realizes that Lindsay's come onto the boat to dive down to the deep core. And I know, actually, it's not Bud who says it. It's one of the guys working on the boats on the surface. And I think he calls her the queen bitch or something like that. And there's another moment towards the end where she calls herself a cast iron bitch. And it's quite a memorable line that I've forgotten the particulars of. But she is referred to throughout the film as a bitch. But as a kind of a stern, kind of no-nonsense kind of, you know... And she kind of owns that herself. And I you know, Gail Hurd has been known from people who've worked with her to be a very stern kind of producing boss. So you can't help but think that if you know, a fair amount about Cameron and his work and his life and his career, the kind of comparisons with his wife, for me, tend to go fairly well noticed. It's hard to kind of separate that in my mind when watching the film. Not in a negative way, but it's certainly in the back of my mind during certain scenes. And again, her voice sounded similar to me at times, but she is the woman who designed the deep core. So they must have worked together, and I love the kind of implications of their previous... Well, obviously they have a relationship, but the previous relationship in which they were together and obviously had worked together, because she knows that place better than anyone. That's why she's going down there. That's why she's been brought in. And at certain points when things go really bad, she's there to know exactly what to do because she's kind of designed the thing. And so, Cameron, again, with his really strong female characters, and in a different way. I like how she has a different flavor to her. And I have to say, Mary Elizabeth is fantastic in the film. And I'll just say right up, I was going to say right up front, as if I'd only just started this video and we're not like 20 goddamn minutes into the thing. But right at the beginning here of me getting into the movie, I'll say that Mary Elizabeth and Ed Harris as Bud, two fantastic performances. I feel like if the rest of the cast, well, I'll say Michael Biehn is excellent as well. So with those three characters, I think if those three performances were on the same level as everyone else in the film, I think that you'd be looking at a big waste of money. Because what makes a film work is the characters, the story, and well, not always, but for the most part in traditional storytelling, it's characters, it's story, and by extension of that, it's performances. And so you have your two lead characters, Lindsay and Bud, and then you have the kind of the faux villain, I suppose, of the piece, Michael Biehn's character, Coffee, the kind of the head Navy SEAL that comes down to lead the crew into this dive down to the submarine, and then he goes down with his team to retrieve one of the nuclear warheads and brings it back onto the deep core, which is where the majority of the tension of the film comes from, because they're not happy with the fact that these Navy SEALs have brought a nuclear weapon onto their mining rig, and all the complications that ensue beyond that. But Michael Biehn is phenomenal, I would say, and there's some really great close-ups on him during the film, which he makes full use of. When his character starts to really get unhinged, and the kind of compression, being under all that weight, it starts to go to his mind, and so he is affected by it more than anyone else. And there are not so subtle hints of that throughout the entire film. As soon as he comes down and they do the decompression, obviously for him it wasn't a complete success, and his hand is shaking, and he kind of stops it, and it's and you can see where it's going from there. But I like the kind of the slow build up of that, the unraveling of his character. But I love just the aesthetic choice of having him with the big mustache. One, because it just differentiates him because this is the third film in a row now, third James Cameron film in a row where Michael Biehn has played a soldier. Terminator, he's a soldier from the future. Aliens, he's a Marine. And in The Abyss, he's a Navy SEAL. But they're all kind of military characters in a sense. In different ways, different forms. Terminator is very kind of intense and kind of vulnerable and stuff, and kind of manic. In Aliens, he's a lot more cooler and assured. There's a different flavor to that character. He's very confident and feels weathered and kind of in control, or at least level-headed compared to some of the other Marines in the movie. And in The Abyss, he's just this guy he's there to do a job, and he is super focused, and for him the job kind of is everything. But that mindset, that kind of military mindset of I have to get the job done no matter what, is then compounded, and then it's just completely thrown into a different sphere entirely when the compression sickness gets to him. And that just that kind of warps that part of his brain that is so focused on getting the job done no matter what, that it turns him into a very dangerous individual. But I love the choice of the mustache along with the kind of the stubble, because it's kind of a dirty stubble. Not that it looks dirty, but like when they're down there and it's kind of grimy and it's kind of sweaty, and his face has kind of he just looks really, I don't know, raw. And there's just something, those close-ups where his eyes are twitching a little bit, just a little bit. And there's just something about him that just looks really unhinged. And I think the sweat or the perspiration coupled with the mustache and the stubble, he just has a really gritty look to him, which was really great, and becomes really menacing towards the end of his kind of character's run in the movie. But Bud, Ed Harris, he does a really good job of being that kind of everyman, and I think that and kind of his frustrations with his disintegrating relationship with his wife Lindsay are played very well. I think that he does a good job with that, but I would say that a lot of the physical stuff he has to do really helps the movie for me. And in particular, there's this one sequence where the deep core, there's an accident with a crane up on the surface, and so a crane is coming down, and all hell breaks loose, and water comes into the rig and everything, and there are people running around, and he's scrambling around. There's water pouring in. It's super dangerous. Like, some of those shots, you can tell they're really dicing with danger with that stuff. It really wasn't like the safest thing in the world. Even though Cameron prided himself on the safety on even though they were doing very dangerous things, there is that story I talked about in the previous video where Ed Harris thought he was going to die, and that was a very emotional thing. And in that documentary, especially when he talks about it, it's really heavy. But there's a certain scene when the water's pouring in, and Ed Harris is running through this corridor, and it's this metal corridor. I don't know if they maybe didn't use metal, but he's clambering around, he's like falling over, there's water's pouring in, and it looks really dangerous. Whether it was or not, whether it was extremely controlled, I was so drawn into that moment because that's Ed Harris doing it. And it made me think of a scene in Titanic when the water's pouring in to the ship, and you have Jack and Rose running down this corridor. There's electric going off and the lights are flickering. The water's pouring in. It's in slow motion. You're meant to really feel for the peril of these characters. And it's really badly done CGI face replacement, and it just takes me out of the moment so much. And I'd never noticed it until I saw it in the cinema in 2012 for the 3D re-release, and I've never unseen it after that. But in The Abyss, in a very similar running down the corridor of water pouring in, it's fucking Ed Harris. And you just there's a tangible quality to that when you see the real actor doing the stunt. And especially all the underwater stuff that they did, which again can't be commended enough. It adds so much to the movie when those guys are down there doing it for real. The effects are just phenomenal. There's a lot of miniature work that is kind of worked in. There's a little bit of stop motion I noticed in some of the certain scenes, which I didn't notice 6 months ago. So I'm glad I watched it again just to be really razor sharp with looking at everything and appreciating everything too. So much blue. But a beautiful blue. I think Cameron must be obsessed with the color blue. You see a lot of it in his movies as they reoccur, and some of the visual ideas that have come through in some of his films in kind of short bursts. I think of the hospital in Terminator 2, the beautiful kind of blue at night. And then in Avatar, it's just like, it's blue mania. It's all over the place. And especially bioluminescence, which is really at the forefront in The Abyss when the NTIs come into it, the non-terrestrial intelligence. And I want to talk about that a little bit more. I might save that until the special edition version, because I know that the special edition cut of the film has more of the NTIs at the end of the film. So I might talk about more of because this one's getting long already, but I think that there's a lot to discuss about those particular characters, which I think I will leave until at least the bigger discussion I have in my head right now until that video. But visually, I mean, just again, seeing them swimming through the water and in the suits and the dialogue that they actually recorded as they were filming, which was kind of a first and it feels real. It feels like someone who is underwater, kind of doing stuff, and it doesn't feel like it's been looped. And maybe they did loop some of that stuff, but and I think they had to do it for some of the scenes. But you just get like a raw, immediate feel to the dialogue when they're down there in those suits, and some of the claustrophobia is so brilliantly done. I've forgotten the guy's name now. I was trying to remember all the names of all the crew, but the big guy, when he has the panic attack inside the American submarine, and he's got the rope that tethers him to Bud. And suddenly it snags, and he's pulling the rope, and you're now in his POV, and you hear the breathing, the heavy breathing, and he pulls the rope, and it's just a frayed end, and now the lights have gone, and he's alone, and the panic that sets in. It's so brilliantly done. The tension really ratchets up in those moments. Now, I do think the pace is a little slow for the film, but I like that it is a slow build. I just think it's a film that, unlike Aliens and the Terminator and Terminator 2 and True Lies, and even Titanic and Avatar, I would say every one of his films, apart from The Abyss, has a really good pace where there's always something going on. Titanic to me is one of the best kind of 3-hour movies pacing-wise, because it just breezes by. There's no moment where it sags, and The Abyss, I think, sags. And I don't mind it when a film sags a little bit if like this film, it is visually beautiful or impressive, and this film is both of those things, from the sets to the, again, the miniature work, but also just I don't know, there's just something different about it because it is underwater for the majority of the film, and it just has a different visual flavor to most other movies, because you don't see a lot of films set on underwater, I'll leave that in for free, stations. Although in the past year we just saw a Kristen Stewart movie called Underwater, which was just that. I think the whole movie is set on one of those things. But there is a claustrophobia inherent to being on an underwater, or being inside an underwater station, I think, that Cameron leans into and then just ratchets it up even more, like I said. So there are moments where the water is piling up on our main characters, and they're kind of putting their head up to the ceiling, and it just makes you crawl out of your skin. And I'm fairly claustrophobic, so I will say, even though I'm fairly claustrophobic, none of that stuff in the film weirds me out or wigs me out. Bishop getting into the pipe in Aliens always, that gives me a shiver, so that's one thing. But so I guess I'm not an extreme claustrophobic, but being in those situations myself, holy shit, I would panic. That wouldn't be pretty, But with The Abyss, it's effective as a viewer feeling tension, so I don't get kind of the extra added element of oh my god, but it is like oh fucking hell. It's like, oh my god, this is, it's a good kind of tension, but I think it's a weirdly paced film, because it gets exciting and then it slows down again, and there's nothing, again, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that, but I think maybe for Cameron's filmography it stands out a bit, because unlike any of his other films, he really takes his time here, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And I feel like I'm repeating that too much. It feels like I'm trying to convince myself, but I honestly think that the slow burn really works for this film. But I'd be lying if I said that it didn't, it didn't grab me as much of it as I don't know if that's the problem. I don't know. Because I feel like I can't criticize it, because I don't think there's anything really wrong with it in terms of the kind of pacing and the slow burn of it. And I'm really intrigued to see how the special edition runs, because it's nearly 3 hours long compared to the theatrical version, which I think is about 2.5 hours, or 2 hours and 20 minutes actually. So I'm intrigued to see if that kind of makes the pacing issues even worse, or if just knowing that, okay, I'm here for 3 hours, you kind of, I think, like, if a film is like over 2 hours, you start to feel like, oh my god, this is like over 2 hours. All right, if it gets to 2.5, you're like, this is a long movie. If it's 3, you're just like, fuck it, like, I'm in for the long haul, whatever, I think you kind of let go of that kind of feeling of dread when a movie's really long. If it gets to the point where it's so long that it's kind of past the point of no return, if you've committed to watching this, you're going to be there all night, so whatever, just 3-4 hours, whatever. So maybe that'll happen with the Abyss special edition for me. I'm not entirely sure. I'm looking forward to seeing if that is the case, though. With all the other characters on the deep core rig, I wanted to mention, I don't feel like they gel as well as, you can't help but compare it to the previous film, which is Aliens, and the Marines, and kind of the camaraderie that kind of came across through those characters felt a bit more natural to me than the ones in The Abyss. And you would think that on The Abyss, that cast would have a stronger camaraderie because they were there for months filming these very intensive scenes, and they're going underwater and doing all this training. And so I feel like it definitely would have been a more intense shoot than Aliens. But and I don't think they don't have chemistry or anything, but I don't know. I don't know if the characters feel underwritten. It's a tricky balance to strike, I think. So you have Hippie, who's this kind of, conspiracy theorist, which plays in almost a bit too neatly into the NTIs appearing halfway through the film. You have One Night, who to me there wasn't enough of her character for me to even get much of her. I mean, there was a moment where near the beginning where One Night she, I can't actually remember the exact exchange, but it was hinted at that she's not a fan of Lindsay. She doesn't really like Lindsay. So, okay, that's interesting. Let's see how that kind of shakes out throughout the rest of the film. They never really interact, and then she gets really upset when Lindsay's, has kind of drowned, and then she's like so emotionally happy. I mean, obviously, if someone is dead in front of you and their heart stopped beating, no matter who it is, it's going to affect you emotionally, right? But it felt like there was a disconnect there from setting up that she doesn't like her. But again, I think it's a human thing. You would feel emotional in a situation where someone is literally lying in front of you, basically like on a slab dead, So I think that it's permissible, but I just think that setting it up and then doing nothing else with those two characters almost felt like a waste. So again, maybe the special edition version will have more of One Night's character. Hippie, the actor who played him, he was like 70% convincing, and then for the other 30%, I felt like I was watching someone act, which is never good. I liked the kind of quirk with the rat that he had with him and stuff, but I just think that, or the mouse might be, I'm not sure if it's a mouse or a rat. I just felt like he wasn't entirely convincing to me. Catfish was the other one. Is it Catfish? I forget the guy's name. The burly guy with the beard. I liked him. He was cool. But I never really felt like, even in Aliens, you don't really get that much time with the Marines. But it just seemed to gel and glue together much better with the group dynamics. But with The Abyss, I really feel like it is, I don't know, it's more just about the kind of relationship between Bud and Lindsay, and the kind of the other crew they're there almost to service the plot a little bit. I don't know. I feel like the group dynamic doesn't work as well as it could. And then you have the Navy SEALs. I did like the kind of dissension perhaps between them where, the one guy wasn't sure that Coffee, Michael Biehn's character, was really doing the right thing when he's like, we're getting this nuclear warhead and we have to do, by any means necessary, we got to protect this thing and get the job done. So I liked that, his kind of team was starting to grow wary of him. So I liked how that evolved and stuff. But so for me, when I think of the film, it really is mainly just focusing on Bud and Lindsay. And I think that relationship is a really interesting one because it is a couple who have kind of separated. And I think I mentioned in the previous video, I can't help but wonder if this was some sort of wish fulfillment from Cameron or some sort of working through his subconscious feelings about his, separation from Gail Hurd, where maybe he wanted to save it. Because that's the impression you get, is that Bud, there's that great scene where he's pissed off at her and he rips off his wedding ring and he throws it into the toilet. And then after about 2 seconds, he goes back in and he fishes it out again and puts it back on. And then that ring ends up saving his life later on, which is kind of a fairly on the nose kind of thing, but it's a nice story beat. I think I like that. Whereas Lindsay, that seems a bit more, or much more reticent to kind of, share a warm relationship moving forward with her husband. There's that bit at the beginning where she doesn't like to be called Mrs. Brigman, and that kind of plays into the ending very well, and so I think he calls her Mrs. Brigman right at the end. So the kind of reconciliation between them feels a little bit forced, kind of, but I also think that the situation they both go through is so emotional and so intense that I completely buy that reconciliation. I just don't think it would last permanently, so I don't know what Cameron really intended by that. I don't know if that was his happily ever after for those two characters. And he is a romantic, I think, and I've kind of been talking, I don't know if it's been in videos that have been released yet in this series because I'm doing this so out of whack, but I've been talking throughout these videos, for me, in my kind of context of making this series, about how Cameron is always making love stories, and this is one of his more overt love stories. And it is kind of an idealistic love at the end of the film when it's all happy and kind of lovey-dovey, but it's a nice moment and they play it so well, those two actors. But I feel like it's maybe not something that would last. So I don't buy the reconciliation as this repairing of their relationship. I don't think that what they've gone through is going to fix everything, but it might. It might. And maybe that's the cynic in me, and maybe that's the idealist in Cameron coming through. And I kind of like that, actually, I suppose. But the wonder that comes through this film is really nice in certain situations, especially when the NTIs start popping up. And I like the kind of thread of Lindsay kind of being the one who always sees them when people don't really believe her and she has to really go to bat for it. And, Bud is like, sorry, I can't really believe this stuff, And so it's so satisfying when the kind of the pod, I forgot they call it now, the water tentacle appears and they all get to see it. And it's a wonderful scene. And it's nice because the CGI still really holds up. It doesn't look like the best in the world, but it's still, for 1989, really holds up and really works for the story, which is what that thing is supposed to be. It's supposed to be working for the story, and you just get so sucked into it, and then it gets cut short, and you want to see more, just like they want to see more, and that is kind of. But I like how they don't really have the time, the means, or or anything to really pursue the NTI thread, because they're now realizing that they have a limited amount of oxygen supply to go. They've got this nuclear warhead on board, so there's all this stuff going on. I really like how it starts unfurling as the third act really kicks in, and we get kind of the showdown with the baddie with Michael Biehn. And he does a great job. I think he's a really great villain in the film, because you understand why he became that way. It was the pressure became too much, literally, and he was clearly a kind of stiff guy who very much was just about the job, and that compounded with, again, like I said, the pressure and the sickness, that kind of just sent him way off the rails and just got him so paranoid that and I think that is some really great tension comes from that when he is pulling the guns out literally and threatening people. And so for me, the real core of the film is the sequence where Bud and Lindsay are trapped in the submersible and it's filling up with water. And I'm just thinking to myself, in that situation, I'd be freaked out. I would be so terrified. And they're just kind of methodically working through ways in which they can kind of save themselves. But they just run out of time and come up with a crazy plan in which Lindsay is going to drown willingly. And he is going to take her back to the deep core and resuscitate her and get her heart going again. And and I love how she convinces him of this. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And she's like, look, you're a better swimmer than I am. It's the best plan we've got. So he agrees, he puts his helmet on, and, they want to have that moment together where it's like, fuck, I might die, I love you. But he said, oh, no, we'll tell you later. Yeah, we'll tell each other everything later. And they kiss, and then, like, the water comes up, and then I love how she's like, no, I'm scared. And she panics, because it's such a human reaction. She is that kind of really strong person who can, face death right in the face, because she knows it's the only way she's going to get out of this situation. But when it's like those final moments when the water is piling right up to her face, she starts to panic. I can't do it. But of course she has to. And he holds her as she dies in his arms. It's horrible, And it's strange, and it's been happening to me since I hit 30. I think I get more emotionally invested in films, and I have to say the sequence in which he brings her back onto the deep core and tries to revive her and resuscitate her, with the pounding on the chest and the breath, and then using the clear pads. I don't know, the electrical clear. I don't know what they're called. The little electrical pads. I don't know. I forget these things. So with a multitude of different resources and methods, it's like pounding the chest, putting the breath through the mouth, and then using the electrical device, and it's just not working. And he is so adamant to get his wife's heart working again. And after a point, he's the only one who's still going. And they're saying, Bud, it's over. You've got to stop. You've got to let it go. She's gone. And he stops, and it's horrible. It's heartbreaking. And just the way she's lying there, eyes open, expression vacant, and for me, it obviously has to be that I'm imagining me in that situation and Connie lying there, and it rips your fucking heart open. And then he keeps going. And, I would imagine watching it for the first time, you're like, oh, stop, you're making it worse for yourself. And he's just like, no, you've never backed down from a fight in your life. He's like, you get up, you bitch. Like, and he starts slapping her in the face. And this is where I think some of the tension on the set came, because I think Cameron got in and was doing some of the slapping. Not entirely sure if that story is true or not. But either way, she's being kind of fairly roughly manhandled. And it just grabs you by the fucking throat, that scene, when it gets that intense towards the end. And it's the moment when he just starts yelling at her to fight. Fight, fight, fight. And then he's screaming fight until his voice is just breaking, and it's just like, fight! And it is, oh my god, it is one of the most emotional pieces of acting I've ever seen in my entire fucking life. It is the high point of the movie. It elevates it from being a really good film to being a great one for me. It's just that one moment that is just so visceral. It's like a transcendent moment to me, which might sound really wanky and over the top, but I fully believe that there is a guy trying to get his wife to come back to life, and that is one hell of a situation to be in. And he makes it so believable with the way he's screaming at her to fight. And then when she starts to breathe again, and she comes to, it's almost like he's willed her back into existence. And the look on his face, the smile, his face is all wet from the water and everything. There's tears streaming down his face. He's just like an explosion of joy. And the amazing thing is that because she walked off set, he was doing that to nothing. He didn't have Mary Elizabeth in front of him to do some of those reaction shots to. What an actor. What a fucking actor. Holy shit. Next level, it really is. And it might seem like a simple thing, you just yell fight, but I feel like there's a way to really misjudge that, and he hits it so fucking perfectly. It just rocked me both times over the past 6 months. It's just an amazing scene. It's one of the most emotionally powerful things I've ever seen. And it's so much better than anything else in the film, I feel like, which is almost like a really bad thing to say because they put so much time and work into this film visually, but just this basic scene of a man with his wife in front of him, dead, and just trying to get it to come back, when it's a possibility, but, it's kind of unlikely, and it's just incredible. So that's kind of like the film climax is there for me. But then it has a really great 30-minute coda in which he decides to go down to disarm the nuclear warhead. And he has to go through the suits, which kind of has the water inside it and stuff. We talked about that in the previous video and stuff. But it's such an unnecessary thing, but it's a really cool... And some of that science just doesn't really work because when he's going down that into the abyss, so to speak, and he's descending thousands of feet... he would just explode. There's nothing... He would implode, in fact. Maybe Cameron's permissible notion for this sequence where Bud goes down way deep, thousands of feet down below into that trench, is that the suit can handle it. But, that's what we got to just assume, because he obviously didn't implode in the film. But, some of the logic there isn't quite as sound as it would be in some of Cameron's other films, I think. Regardless of the outlandish notion of him doing this. And I almost feel like once he gets to the bomb, it's kind of all over too quickly in a way. You feel like there's going to be a big tension-filled scene of him trying to disarm the bomb, and it's really just unscrew it and cut the wire. And they play around a little bit with can he see the colours of the wires, and is he fully there, cognizant to do it? But it's over fairly quickly. But I guess the emotional thrust of that isn't really about him disarming the bomb. You kind of know he's going to disarm the bomb. It's whether or not he's going to come back. And the kind of the brilliant tension that is built from him having this keypad, because his helmet is filled with water, the breathing fluid, that which I guess I talked about in the previous video, but not this one. They talk about this breathing fluid in the beginning of the movie, and they put the rats inside, which is a real thing. They've done it with animals, but I think a human did it as well, where they actually drew in water to their lungs and were able to breathe it with this some scientific mumbo jumbo. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but apparently there was some basis on scientific fact and theory in some of that stuff. But anyway, so he's got the breathing fluid, so he can't speak on the mic, so he's got this keypad. And so they build the tension through them waiting for him on the deep core and kind of seeing the messages and kind of talking to him as he's going down. He's experiencing all the pressure and stuff and the sickness. And so that's like, I think it's a really well done sequence towards the end there. And then finally the ending. I think the ending for me doesn't quite work. I love the visual of it. I almost even like the simplistic message of it, but it's all over far too soon for me. So again, I'm really intrigued about the special edition cut and seeing how that will hopefully flesh out the ending a bit more, because it feels like he gets down there and it's this sense of wonder, and then he sees the NTIs, and then we just go to the end. It feels very rushed to me, and I felt that both times over the past 6 months. I felt like it just kind of like ends very quickly, doesn't it? I feel like the film is, and I think that's really my main issue with the pacing, because it takes its time. It's a slow burn. I'd be lying if I said my mind didn't wander at some points, because there's a lot of just underwater stuff, which is, undeniably very impressive. But there is a lot of repetition in that, and when things are moving slowly, your mind drifts a little bit. But when that pace is slowly building up, and then the excitement starts to build in some of those action-packed sequences, and then we get to the ending, and then we've had this emotional climax, and then we have another emotional kind of moment where Lindsay kind of realizes that he's not going to come back up. I knew this was a one-way ticket, and just how emotional she gets and everything. She's brilliant. She's absolutely fantastic. I think she along with Ed Harris. Well, I would say that Ed Harris is really good in the film and amazing in that that resuscitation scene. But I would say that Mary Elizabeth is fantastic throughout the entire film. Like, she's so believable. And I just love the fire in her character, and I love the personality. I love the performance. I think she steals the show for me, even though Ed Harris has the most impressive moment acting-wise of the film. But I think that she does a great job of lying there lifeless. I think there's a skill to doing that properly, where, for me, seeing the visual of her lying there kind of just flat out, just eyes glazed over almost. I think there's a skill to that, and that emotion in that scene comes from the fact that you believe that she's dead there without a pulse. And this is something that Connie is always really critical of in movies. When someone's dead in a film, she always looks to see if they're breathing, and I couldn't detect a single fucking movement from her body during that sequence. So maybe you can find it, I don't know, maybe I wasn't looking hard enough, but I think that she did a really good job with that, even though people maybe wouldn't think about the fact that she's, she's not acting, she's just lying there. But I mean, it's kind of rough, I would say, and that's probably why she walked off set. Probably very cold, and you're being kind of, they're doing the kind of, the pounding on the chest and stuff. And anyway, so I think that overall throughout the entire film, she is fantastic. And again, Michael Biehn is a standout. So those three actors make the movie for me in terms of the characters, and the rest kind of fall by the wayside a little bit. But there's this build up, like I was saying, and the kind of the pacing, and then by the time we get to the ending, it's this big wow at the end. Holy shit, and then it's like, wow, so where is this going? Oh, it's over. No, okay, and it's a happy ending, but it just kind of like nothing is really explained. Not that it really needs to be, I suppose, but it's like, well, what happens next? Are they all just like, all right, see ya. All right, we're just gonna get back on our ship. Yeah, well, you're gonna go back down, and we won't talk about this again. Like, I feel like there needs to be more, but then I don't know what more you could do with that. It's a bit of a tricky one, and I know that there's nothing more beyond that final scene in the special edition version. They both end on the exact same scene, but I don't know how much they'll flesh that out. And one thing that has bothered me in seeing this film again is when that kind of ship or city raises up from the water, very Atlantis-like, I would say. It makes you think of like the lost cities and stuff. And again, I'll leave that to the special edition, but the crux of what I was going to say about the NTIs is, are they aliens, or are they just like this intelligence that live down deep in the ocean? That's something that intrigued. I'm not sure what the intent is. Either way, when the city raises up at the end, or the big ship, the big thing, the deep core is on the ledge of this kind of crevice like this. So this is like the trench that goes down way deep into the ocean, and on here is the kind of the ledge, still very deep under the ocean, where the deep core sits. So the deep core is up here, and the big city ship thing is here, and it starts to rise up here this way. And as it rises to the surface, it brings the deep core up with it. But it wouldn't do that because, like, if the trench is here and the city's here, there's no way for the city thing would have to literally go up a degree like that and then scoop it up. Scoop up the deep core, and I don't feel like it really did. It's just very strange because when it rises up, the deep core is like just in the middle of the city almost, or the ship, whatever it's supposed to be. And that always bugged me somewhat. I mean, it very conveniently gets them all onto the surface, and there's even a very throwaway kind of moment of like, oh wow, we just rose straight up from the bottom of the ocean, and we have no decompression sickness. They must have done something to us. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Because they're putting so much emphasis on the decompression and the pressure and everything, and then the end of the movie they just get launched right up straight away, which would be very dangerous. So they kind of just throw that away. They did something to us, So I guess I just got to think about the deep core ending up on the surface of the ship or city as just that they just did something. They just brought us on, just teleported us or something. I don't know. That's one thing that kind of bothers me a little bit. I think that I don't know if there's a way that with the visual effects it might have been tricky, but perhaps when the city was coming up and it kind of maybe bumps into the crevice and then some of the rocks fall away and you see the deep core slide onto it, maybe, which is maybe what permissibly had happened, but then it would be on the kind of lip and edge of the city, right? I don't know. So that's just a very random thing that I got hung up on. I still think that I struggle with this film because the ending feels a tad rushed, and maybe overall it doesn't hold my attention as much as the other films, even though I admire its purity. I think that from a visual standpoint, it's phenomenal. Cameron had said that and I think I mentioned that in the previous video as well. I apologize. I filmed that one quite a few months ago. So I'm pretty sure I mentioned that Cameron said he wanted to do, for this movie, for underwater science fiction, what 2001 A Space Odyssey did for outer space science fiction. So is The Abyss kind of the 2001 A Space Odyssey of the ocean? Well, I don't think there's much competition, for one thing. It certainly doesn't have the finale of 2001 A Space Odyssey. It has a lot more emotion and better characters, I would say, with the lead characters than 2001 A Space Odyssey, but I don't think it's quite had the impact as 2001, even though it's I wouldn't say equally, but in a different way, kind of as impressive as 2001 in terms of the special effects, and not even the special effects, but just the guys down there diving and doing all that stuff for real, and that stuff is so impressive. So there's a lot of tangibility, if that's even a word, to the movie, where you can just tell. The naked eye can tell when some of that stuff is real. One effect that hasn't aged very well in the era of high definition is when they used the submersibles, and the trick that they did was they had miniature submersibles and projected a little kind of ball with or like a screen with like the viewing port of the submersible is like a kind of a half globe, and that's where the people sit in, and they do sit inside these real full-size submersibles, so you get kind of a feel for it before they then use the screens on the miniatures to project images of the actors so that you can still see them moving around inside, and that doesn't quite look as convincing. Now you would do that digitally and comp them into the kind of cockpits and stuff, and some of the shots, especially when Lindsay and Bud are kind of racing around with Coffee down there with two kind of battling submersibles. When the camera gets in too close, you can see very clearly it's kind of just a screen with the actors on there. But otherwise, I think that some of the lighting and some of the special effects and the practical effects are absolutely incredible, and the story does hook me in. It's and it was exciting when we watched it 6 months ago. I was like, wow, this is almost like watching a new Cameron film, because I was so kind of unfamiliar with the broad strokes of like every scene. I remembered very vague things about the ending and stuff and certain key moments, but a lot of it was very unfamiliar to me, and there was something exciting about that. But I do think that a little bit for me, the pacing does suffer. The movie's overall feel at times. And both times I kind of felt that. But yeah, I'm intrigued to give it one more final shot with the special edition to fully decide where But again, I could watch this again in 10 years and think, this is his best film. Like, I really don't know. I doubt that, to be honest with you, because I think he's made much better films. But it might be a case of, in 5-10 years time, I'll really love it. And I think it's a great film. I really, really like it. I really enjoy it. And for me, it's like a 9 out of 10 movie, a 4.5 out of 5. It just doesn't have that extra oomph to it for me, for some of the pacing issues, and the ending falling a little bit flat for me. I want a little bit more of that interaction with Bud and the NTIs down there, and that. There's just, I feel like there's more, and from what I understand, the special edition gives us more. So I'm very excited now to get to that, even though I only just watched it a few days ago. And I will say the reason I've left it this long is because I was just dragging my feet a bit, because I'm not that excited to watch The Abyss over and over again, which is something that it's different for me with these other movies, with Aliens, with the Terminator 2, Titanic even, and Avatar. I can watch those films again and again. With The Abyss, I think for me it's like to go to what Connie likes to kind of say with movies. Connie will have like a very specific kind of ranking system for like films. Like, well, that's a film I'd watch every 7 years. For me, for The Abyss, I would say that it's a film I'd like to watch maybe once every 2 or 3 years, maybe, And if a Blu-ray comes out, I'd watch it again in an instant, because while the transfer that I watched was fantastic, some of the details are a little bit muddy at times because of the compression and maybe just the broadcast that it was sourced from. So I think when you really get in there and you kind of get those details in the grain, and I think it's gonna, hopefully Cameron hasn't gone in with kind of not even a fine-tooth comb, but with a nice kind of a big slap of DNR, because we know that Cameron likes to make his movies look modern and remove some of the grain, and I really fucking hate that. I mean, this film could look stunning with a proper, 4K remaster, whether it's on Blu-ray or not, or 4K, because they have talked about how Disney are not, because Disney now owns 20th Century Fox, and by extension The Abyss, and Disney don't want to do any more catalog 4K Blu-ray releases. Apparently, that might be what's holding it up even further. I don't know. But if it comes out, I'll be there day one. That's why I don't feel too bad about illegally downloading the version of the film that I found. I mean, I own a copy of the movie. It makes me feel a little bit, better about it. But even then, I wouldn't feel too bad about it, to be honest. I'm not too much of a I'm not too much of a purist about that sort of thing. I think that if we're watching movies and we're enjoying movies, I think that's the main thing. There is a line to be drawn, of course, I think. If people pirate their movies constantly and that's all they do, and they don't support the film industry in any way, then that's a problem. But, I will say that some of those adverts from about 20 years ago, that you wouldn't steal a car, you wouldn't steal a TV. Yeah, that stuff never used to really make me break a sweat or anything. It's but with this instance, I feel like I'm totally justified. In other instances, I'd say I wasn't justified, but in this case, it's like, what are you going to do? I want to see the film in high definition. I'm rewatching all of these films in the best possible quality. I don't want The Abyss to be the one that's the odd one out. And I also feel like to watch the film on a 65-inch TV, I need to see it in better quality than standard definition. And that might have hindered my viewing experience, because I fucking hate standard definition movies. I'm a complete HD snob now. Anyway, I can't believe that was as long as it was, and I have so much more to say about certain things, but that was the very brief broad strokes of my thoughts on The Abyss. That was my review of the film. So yeah, but I will reconvene and watch the special edition. You'll see that in a few videos time. There's 3 videos following this one about Terminator 2. So you're going to get the returning to Skynet behind the scenes story, my thoughts on Terminator 2, and then No Grain But What We Make, my guide to the various Blu-ray and high definition releases of Terminator 2, I should say, not the Terminator. So yeah, look forward to those 3, and then we'll come back with the Abyss special edition and see if my opinion changes, what I think of the editions. And that's another thing, is that I didn't want to wait 6 months after watching The Abyss and then just watch the special edition version and base my review of the theatrical cut on the special edition. If that makes any kind of sense, I'll rephrase that, because I feel like that was a little bit too complicated. I didn't want to make my review of The Abyss based on the special edition version and then kind of extrapolating backwards of like, well, the theatrical version didn't have that moment in it, because I'm not as familiar with the film, so there's probably going to be things in the special edition cut that I don't really clock that's new. I know some of the scenes that are new in the film, but I don't know everything, so I won't pick up on all of that stuff, but I'll pick up on some of it, I'm sure, because I've just watched it a few days ago, so fingers crossed I'll have something to say on that. But also, just to round it off, and I base my opinion on Aliens and Terminator 2 and Avatar based on the extended cuts of all those films. Those are the versions that I watch and I enjoy the most, and so fingers crossed we go 4 for 4 with The Abyss. Anyway, thank you for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed. If you haven't, I apologize. I feel like this was a bit of a rambly shit video. Hopefully not, but stay tuned for the next video. Thank you for watching again, and I'll see you with that one, which will be the next one. I've totally fucked up my sign off. Goodbye.